So, welcome to Treasury Elite Leadership Series. I would like to thank all our viewers and members for supporting this noble cause of Treasury Elite, whose main objective is networking, knowledge sharing, and mentoring. Time and again, we bring in world class speakers and thought leaders across the world in the field of treasury, global financial markets, and management, and conduct various programs, webinars, and conferences in different formats. Treasury Elite Leadership Series is one such format where we learn from industry leaders about their experiences of running their businesses, opportunities and challenges they encounter, and broad trends that they see for the future. Today, we have Mr. V. Kumaraswamy, one of the well known and respected names in the industry. He's currently the CFO of JK Paper Limited. He has earlier worked with large groups like Atul, ITC, SIBA, Voltas across various management functions and verticals. He has been a university rank holder during his bachelor's and postgraduate from the prestigious IIM Ahmedabad. He's also a cost accountant and expert in TQM and ERP systems. Very few people know that he's been very popular. He's written a book which is known as Making Growth Happen in India, which has been very, very popular and based on which he had a privilege to work with various ministers, secretaries, IAS officials. He actively engages with industry bodies like FICCI and involved in various international delegations and spends time with academia like IIT Delhi. He is also socially involved with National Commission for Scheduled Caste on ways of creating and generating employment. Welcome, Mr. Kumaraswamy. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much for the very nice introduction. Feels so nice, and thanks for giving me the platform to reach out to so many people.
Great, sir. Thanks for joining. Glad to have you today as a part of the Treasury Elite Leadership Series. In the next 35 minutes, we'll love to learn from your experiences.
Oh, yeah.
So, my first question to you is, sir, we would like to know about your transitions across various roles, career progressions, and three major learnings over the last many years.
After graduation, so I went into IIM without any experience. So raw, you don't have that kind of what to absorb, what is important, etc. from the career perspective. So I would briefly say about for the first about 6 or 7 years is more learning phase. Learning in the sense that learning the practicalities, the things, how to interact with people, how to motivate them, get motivated, how to learn from others, etc. Those kinds of soft skills and working in an organization which you have now seen from inside. After that, the active doing phase of the regular functional expertise, all those things. After maybe about another 5 or 6 years is the looking around phase, or the leadership phase, and where you are experimenting not only within your own function, across functions, and experimenting your abilities with the other areas, as well as over a period of time other businesses as well as other geographies, etc. If you ask me, I would say the education is only 50% inside the classrooms and universities. 50% of it takes place in the next 10, 15 years in terms of what you learn. In that sense, that my stints with Voltas and Ciba Geigy have been very, very helpful in the sense that they broadened my vision and scope of knowledge, etc. And also made me a little more risk-taking than I was otherwise. We were generally confined to your own area of expertise, and you don't want to look around, jump up here and there. So these two companies did give me a lot of opportunities to work with adjoining areas. So over a period of time, I went as far as becoming a TQM trainer and a JITS trainer, and which are purely technical in nature. Right? And then look at strategy, cross-border transactions, and trying to look around for plantation initiatives in very unknown kind of economies like Swaziland and South Africa, and Myanmar, etc. So it's been a very enjoyable journey, one of learning, one of acquiring risk-taking abilities, and then the ability to interact with people. And have a lot of fun in the process.
Great, great. So, your industry is evolving, sir. What are the new technology changes that you are seeing in the industry, and how are Indian companies adopting it, and how are we gearing for 2025? And is there any best practice that we need to take from the developed and matured markets in the West?
See, I would say paper industry has been one of the success stories in the last about 10 to 12 years. When when push comes, in that sense, I think paper companies which are all pushed to the brink, and let's say about 10, 11 or something, because of very high raw material prices. I'm talking about all of the first, top 10 to 20. I'm not talking about our JK paper alone. Rebounded very, very well by investing. They have been investing in R&D for their main source of raw material, which is wood, and where the productivity from nowhere near the picture in the world standards. I'm just giving you some numbers. Brazil produces something like 250 tons per hectare in their cycle of around 7 years. And whereas India was producing 60, 70 in that kind of range, 1:4 kind of stuff. But today we are almost there, almost about 200 kind of stuff. And all of it has happened because of very, very, very committed work over the years. And the productivity of land is almost 3 to 4 times. And the time to cut the trees from almost 5 to 7 years has come down to about 3 years now, all because of clonal technology, etc. And with that one single initiative, the industry has been able to slice quite a bit of its cost. Plus, we have done fantastic work in logistics and power and water consumption. Water consumption, just to give an example, we used to be consuming something like 80 meter cube of water in 2010 or 11 per ton of paper. Today, we are less than 30, down by almost about 70% or so. Likewise, coal also. And Amit, I'm already on call. Coal also, we used to be consuming something like 1.8 tons or ton of paper. Today, we are 0.6. So we have done it in a very sustainable way, very, very hard focused on internal cost structures. Today, I think most of the top 10, 12 companies must be almost on par with the world efficiencies for our scale. Of course, China and Brazil, etc., operate at average capacities which are 5 to 10 times ours. So obviously, there are some scale economies, and which we may not benefit. But for similar sized plants, I think we should be, on par. Having said that, of course, the industry, which was growing very well in India, although the Western world had started declining, is also seeing some shades of, tapering off in terms of demand. And from some double-digit growth or high single-digit growth, it's about 5% the kind of stuff. And one has to see how it develops post-COVID. But I think the focus has been on internal cost rather than external demand, and that has paid very handsome dividends. In terms of technology, most of the technology comes from, non-wood related technology comes from European countries. And it is more a choice of which technology you use rather than developing the technology. And as a measure of looking forward, we connected with one of these European manufacturers on this Industry 4.0, where everything is monitored and controlled for our plant through their help, and that optimizes our operations quite significantly.
So anything specific that you feel that we should be preparing and gearing ourselves, all the companies in your sector, for 2025?
No, the way forward is definitely technology, better use of machinery, and then the logistics one has to plan and execute very properly. Of course, the ongoing journey of wood. And now we have tasted blood, so wood is a very high source of competitive strength. And if you have been able to come so far, why not beat the Brazilians, who are the best in this one?
Sure.
And come there 80, 85%. I think one day we should come to a stage where we'll be better than them. And Avis Rent-A-Car always tries better because they're number 2, So we have to try to beat them. So we should try in that direction.
So I'm sure we will. So, sir, what are the innovations and innovations or cost saving techniques that you or your company have undertaken, giving you a significant edge in the industry in
Yeah.
the field of financial management? It could be on exchange rates, commodity risk, interest rates, capital structure,
Yeah.
credit ratings, cash flow forecasting, ALM, anything that you would like to highlight, or banking improvisations, something like
I
that?
have spoken about this clonal technology, which has been indigenously developed and it has shaped up very well. The also on this the way the paper itself is made has undergone a significant change in the composition. It used to be 90% pulp, which is twice as expensive as the balanced 10% material, which is talcum and binders, etc. Those material we have I mean, we have taken it up to almost about 25% now. The pulp has come down to 75. So very significant cost saving. Imagine saving 50% on 15% of our materials. But that's one side of it. The second side of it is we are also trying out various things on commercial aspects of business. The one thing I would like to highlight is for the last big expansion, we source most of our funds from exchange credit agencies, that is ECA credit, and that is guaranteed by the local ECGC kind of equivalents, and the funds are provided by commercial banks. That comes at very, very cheap rates. And we almost went a whole log there and borrowed all the 100% of the funds requirement under that line. And as luck would have it, it was in Europe, and we studied European, the currency matters and the way they were growing vis-a-vis us and vis-a-vis US, etc. carefully, and we kept a lot of such exposures actually without cover. Almost 70-80% of the cover was open without any cover. That in fact delivered net delivered cost of interest at 3% thereabouts of nearly 5 years, and compared to about 10 or 11% we may have had to pay in 2010-11, when the interest rates were very high. That's a very significant amount. If you ask me, the total savings on that measure alone in the last about 7-8 years the project has been up and running would have covered almost 1/5 the cost of the project itself.
I know. Interest rates have been pretty low and the euro has not moved much. So I think a lot of companies have used this opportunity at borrowing at Euribor. So since you touched upon currencies, and you have exports in more than 40 countries, I understand. How do you handle your FX and interest rate risk? Do you have any concept of value at risk that you adopt? Do you have a stress testing or a scenario analysis kind of a thing? Do you use any tried-tested hedging models? What is the way you would tell other treasurers and CFO to protect their EBIT and revenue hedging? Any advice specifically on the policy?
There are two things. One is the internal risk control measures, etc., which are whatever you mentioned. It is all normal. And on top of it, we also have some external consultants, A.V. Rajwade and co. The way we have done it is, whatever you do, however much you read and however much you see the televisions, etc., the external knowledge that you can gather, there are some limitations because your focus of attention is, on day-to-day things, so many. So we have engaged them to come and brief us every maybe 2 or 3 weeks on what all is happening in the marketplace. Where is the demand coming from? Where is the supply going to? How are the banks reacting? How is the RBI reacting? Overseas ECBs and all these people. So we get a landscape of things which are happening. And on top of it, we will have to superimpose our own requirement. And generally, what we have done is, apart from the mechanics, I'm leaving out the mechanics for the time being. Our general reading is on the currency. There are only two currencies we deal with, euro and dollar. We generally see how that economy is performing vis-a-vis India, or India is performing vis-a-vis that company. And what is the general overall long-term or medium-term trends that we are going to see. And both for interest rates as well as the currency movements. And based on that, we have been very, very aggressive in our coverage percentages. See, if you look at it, any volatility, whether it is 97 Asian crisis, 2000 to 2003, this dot-com bubble, 2008, the steep uptick or downfall and volatilities take place in a matter of about 3 to 4 months. After that, it traces back to some normalcy with some corrections of whatever
That's
pressure.
right. Perfect.
So what we have taken was we will always have the next 6 months exposures covered fully, so that the immediate pressures on P&L balance sheet is taken care of. But beyond that, I know the return to normalcy is a normal factor in these kinds of volatilities. So I take very high liberties in terms of not covering. Sometimes I've gone down, the coverage has gone down to as low as 10% or not. And rarely we go beyond 30% or something. So this has paid off very handsomely, like euro. It has never depreciated the kind of interest rates, covered interest arbitrage you're talking about. It has never deteriorated at the rate at which the forward premiums would imply. So I save nearly 4 to 5% straight away, there, and that's the way we have been playing. So the risk management in terms of the mechanics and day-to-day, etc., is there, but on an overall basis, this is our thinking and philosophy based on which we have been playing the game. So far, touch wood, I think it has paid handsomely in the last 15 years to us. And
I'm sure. I wish you all the best. That the trend may continue, and you create a lot of windfall gains in your foreign exchange and interest rate risk. Of course, in terms of leadership, sir, I would like to ask you that: are you a left brain leader or a right brain leader? And how do you keep a balance between head, hand, and heart?
Well, I would say it has varied over a period of time. You can afford to be left-brained or something in the earlier part of the career, but you have to be a lot more creative and risk-taking and a little flamboyant and expansive in your thinking as you go along. Because over a period of time, I think I have always maintained that if you are if you have multiple solutions to any problem, you will never be afraid of the problem. Okay. So to that extent, you have to be experimental. You have to keep on reading. You have to keep on being creative and developing solutions, learning from others, reading from others, etc. And of course, you have to be sensitive to the people's feelings. Because the higher you go, the more you depend on the other people, and you have to have a way of getting the best out of them. And the way to get the best out of them is not by flogging them, but by motivating them to achieve their own best on their own, and that's what counts. I think sensible balance is required, and between left and right. And over a period of time, I have found that right has paid me more dividends, and in that sense, it's been a very valuable journey.
That's right, sir. Uh, this question is very important, and it will create a very sound message to a lot of our viewers. Please share one of your most extreme life-changing experience
Yeah.
and how your professional and personal life evolved post that. Was it a big personal or a company financial loss that you took or succumbed to, a family or personal health emergency,
Yeah.
relationship fallacy, anything that jolted you and lead you push the reset button, which changed your life completely, sir? Any thoughts?
I would, you know, recount two experiences. And the first one, of course, I would, say that if others also can go through, it's fine. But the second one, I'll definitely not. The first one was what I had begun my career in the manufacturing companies, that is Voltas and Seba, largely in management accounting, that kind of areas. And then this ITC in one of their financial services companies offered me as CFOs, managing funds for a financial services company, where you deal with money day in and day out, and as luck would have it, this was in 1991. I joined them with lots of hopes that I'm going to fly high, etc. And within two weeks, the Harshad Mehta scandal broke out. And whichever banker you go into, even with ITC's name, or even at the train or something, everybody used to look at you, with downcast eyes, as if this every other gentleman who's in finance is kind of a thief or something. And life was very tough for the last, for the first 6 months or so, because no finance was coming. You were supposed to be making your money by turning over cash, but no finance was coming, and generally the life was very tough for everybody. Nobody was, having any confidence in placing any funds with the finance companies, and people had taken heavy losses. All those things were there. But I think, the having joined, there was no going back, and obviously just got married, and there was no way of giving up in that sense. So we had to be creative, look at various opportunities, listen to a lot of people, and look at every opening to see how to make it come. I would say that has added the loads of confidence in terms of being able to overcome very difficult situations. That's the background of what I said. If you have solutions to everything, you don't feel confident, diffident or something. In fact, Navjot Singh Sidhu, that batsman, related once his experience with Sachin Tendulkar facing against this Curtly Ambrose and Ian Bishop. Everybody says Sachin Tendulkar has 2 or 3 shots for every ball, and Navjot Singh Sidhu faced the first over and took 3 on his body, and 3 of them he couldn't even see where they were going. I told everything to Tendulkar at the end of the over, and how you're going to see. The first ball, Tendulkar came out 2 or 3 steps and hit Ian Bishop over mid-wicket for a 6, I believe. So this is what is meant by risk taking. If you have 2 or 3 shots, you'll never be afraid of anybody. That's the kind of stuff. So I think it's that skill to believe that you can evolve solutions. If you have 2 or 3 solutions, you don't have to be bothered. You can tailor your solution to them. That is a great belief that came only after that. Prior to that, I wasn't even willing to take any chances with the kind of assignments I was looking at. Then, of course, next, of course, is a more recent 2013 experience of getting mugged in Shanghai.
Oh.
Very, very horrible experience for about maybe 35, 40 minutes. But I would say till date, that has been the most life-changing experience, because near-death experience, if I can call it. And people beating you, and 6 people hardly speaking English, all thugs beating you with their foot and everything. But I was observing their behavior, how are they doing, why are they doing what they're doing, etc. And at the end of 7th or 8th minute, I took a deep sigh. I said, what will these people gain out of killing me? A dead body in their hands. This was in the heart of Shanghai. Dead body in their hands is more of a problem for them than me, So they are not going to kill me anything. And then the next about 30 minutes or maybe even 20 minutes or something was outstanding, and I patted myself on the back for being this one, lying profusely but in a very convincing way, as they went through each and every card of mine where I could have easily lost about 30-40 lakhs by way of limits available. I gave one lie after the other very confidently to see how to get out of it. And I learned a lot. They are extremely well-trained professionals. Their SOPs is brilliant. And after that, I was walking back to my hotel, which was about 150, 200 yards. Believe me, none of those pains really attended to me. I was not even thinking about them. I was only thinking, what was the reason for that question he asked? Why did he do what he did? As soon as I went into that room, whenever they cornered me, they went through all my calls. Why did he do it? And then he asked me how much I have to pay to the hotel, and he gave me that money back. It took $800, $900, but he ensured that I will have enough money to pay back the hotel. Why did he do it? All those things had some answer to it. Very logical answer to SOP. And brilliant guys, I must say, from their operating perspective. And I also realized that many things that we value in life are really worthless. Actually, 80% of the things are worthless. We unnecessarily get heated up over small things. And after that, I've become a lot more relaxed person. Many of the things which normally shake others into losing the cool, becoming anxious or angry or something, I just glide over.
That's been very candid of you, sir, of sharing these two instances and telling us about accepting the life the way it is. You don't know what next is waiting for you, and taking your challenges and looking at options in life. You don't know how and why things have been meant, and it has happened with you. And especially
Yeah.
COVID is a very big example. Thanks for being very candid. I'm sure it's a very great message for all the viewers.
Yeah.
So my next question to you is, sir, how do you maintain a spirit of competitiveness without combativeness and aggression in your organization? How do you bring consistency on your organization acts and things? And how do you ensure culture does not be isolated in the corner office?
See, one thing I do is, as I said, train my people in all the various rules, regulations, acts, etc. That's for one. And secondly, I involve most of my juniors and even one level below also in most of the meetings, meeting with the external people and visitors, etc. So they learn by observing the other people as well as how we react, etc. And so I build skills, build capabilities, and I tell them all to research for information. You don't have to do everything to learn the lesson. You don't have to make all the first mistakes. Many of the other people are there making those mistakes. So let's try to learn from them. So that on day-to-day basis, you have a bouquet of solutions, bouquet of things that you don't have to experiment anymore. You have learned it from the others, and you give them a lot of freedom in terms of being able to do their own work without any getting pestered or something. I believe you and me, I think they turn out excellent job. I think the the way to motivate people is to make them self motivated. They have to feel that they are doing it for themselves. They are it's a self actualization, if you can call it. Once you put them on that mode, you don't have to even hold them accountable of something. In fact, I would, and I keep going every once in 2 years with my college mates to one of the destinations abroad, like this, this South Africa, this Tanzania, Kenya, Masai Mara, etc., Bali, Macau, etc. So it's usually a week's trip. But many of the, 6, 7 of us, we keep going, and most of the trips, I don't even get a phone call from my company or my colleagues. They all wonder, what is the matter? Am I employed at all in the first place? Something. I said, if they know exactly what they have to do, and they also know that they will stand by if there's any crisis, what is the need for them to talk to me in the first place? I am aware that they know that if there is a crisis, they can wake me up at 12 o'clock also and ask them. They also are confident that they can tackle the situation themselves. So where's the need for feedback or talking to them? I'll talk to them about their girlfriends or their health or Mumbai's weather or some such thing. Why should I necessarily disturb them? Why should they disturb me here? So that's the so if you ask me to summarize, it's training, building up their skills, and asking them to be equipped information wise as well as skills and knowledge wise, and capabilities and experience. If you give them all, they will do their own job. You don't have to even interfere.
Great. So trusting your people and learning from other people's experiences is the way go forward, because life is too short to learn from your own experiences.
Right.
Great, sir. Couple of your personal questions. So 3 rituals for the day that you follow, and what is the best career advice that you have ever received?
I have received, you mean?
Yes, you have received from your seniors.
Uh, Routine is obviously the, as you age, you have to take care of your physical health as well. And so I have last about 3.5 years, I had one advice for knee replacement. I also have some spondylitis, etc. but somehow I don't have that much of faith in allopathy or Western methods. So I said I'll go for this South Indian Keralite massage therapy for this spondylitis problems, as well as physiotherapy for my knee problems. And both of them have gotten me at least 95% back on track. And so 45 minutes of yoga, which is breathing and physical exercises combined, is a must for me. That is for sure. Then, of course, the usual, the daily routines of the office takes over. And when I come back, I read and write both. And I'm a writer also, columnist and author. I write a lot of columns for the economic dailies. Tell you, on an average, if you want to write a page, you must read at least 200 pages. So that's when you will get the motivation, masala, as well as the right kind of thoughts tickling you to put it down in writing. And I have a very fairly decent rate of success in publishing, almost over 90-95%, whereas the rate of publishing on the rate of articles that come to the newspapers is less than 1 or 2% actually. So
So I would like to interrupt you, sir. Would love to know about the book that you published and which allowed you to work with the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister also closely, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu. Yeah.
And that is a must for me. Reading and writing is a must for me. So is yoga. And of course, the keeping up tabs with the professional happenings going on. That is this one. As far as career advice goes, in the ITC when I was working, there was a lady MD, and she taught me the realities of life, realities of how people think, and you can't change much about people's behavior. Idhar udhar ka thoda adjustment hoga, and that is all based on self-consideration and selfishness. You cannot change them too much. It's better to quickly understand that and modify your own behavior to take care of it rather than trying to change the other guy and wasting your time in the process when you don't even know how much in touch that guy is going to be in your professional life. It may be 6 months, 7 months, you may be quarreling very heavily. At the end of 6 months, the guy may not be there, may not be in the same organization. He would have flown away, maybe may have died. What all things happen? So that was very, very, one very sound advice. Of course, many facets also was, taught to me. In terms of professional interaction, that was very good. Then, of course, this one professional advice I would like to give others is progressively develop a very good sense of humor. If you are humorous, if you can see the lighter side of things, you don't have to lose your cool. You don't have to get boxed into a situation where you feel angry, frustrated. Humor is a panacea for many ills of this one. It also gives you a sense of balance, how much you want to push yourself to achieve something and how much to give up. That kind of thing also comes. And right kind of balance between life outside the office, inside the office, as well as each colleague is a great source of inspiration, as well as entertainment and enjoyment and friendship. All that thing comes from the friendship. Right from the peon to the office, security staff to receptionist to the general manager, everybody is a source of your happiness. And you have to extract it the best way, and the best way is humor, being yourself level-headed, level with them. That is a great question. And I'll come to the other question of the book. The book is about how to make growth happen in India, which is 12% pitches for. And I have been writing since '94 in various pink paper and this one. As I said, I have got a very good level of success there. And I have been mostly unconventional in my writing. I will look at it and I'll apply the principles of microeconomics of what I have learned in the office, etc., into macroeconomic issues or monetary or fiscal issues or something. How does common sense approach this one? And initially, when the social media was just coming up, I used to receive as many as 200, 300 comments and all. Now, of course, receiving 3, 4 comments is a great source of achievement to anybody. Social media has collapsed the attention span of everybody. So I had collected the various, thought process which I had experimented and proposed it as a book to Sage Publications, which is one of the leading academic kind of books, and it is a peer-reviewed work which is which have been reviewed by all the pink papers, and it has received very good reviews. And the Andhra Pradesh government, when it was coming up as a new state, they had the chief secretary and the director of planning and secretary planning had gone through my book, and they invited me, would you like to join us and work for some time, because we are putting up this document for 15 years plan. And we do believe that you have some masala to make it 12% instead of 8.5 or 9, whatever the original paper suggested. Would you like to work with us for 6 months to 12 months? We'll give you an office in Delhi and you can work. But of course, when I approached my employer, he said, you can do it even sitting in your office and doing your work. Just ensure that your normal work gets done, which was pretty acceptable to me. But during the course of the work, this Amravati was coming up, so I used to go there and spend about a day or two every month, bouncing off my ideas to various people in the Department of Planning. And in fact, I must have met almost 30, 40 secretaries in various departments, etc. It is one, as I look at it, I look at life as more fun and learning rather than teaching anybody or something. I did, of course, had to give 5 or 6 papers on specific subjects which they had wanted. That I managed to finish, but I think I learned a lot more than they would have ever hoped to learn from me. It was one fantastic experience.
So since you touched about humor, one fun fact which we don't know about you so far.
Well, I also write columns on travel experiences.
Oh.
In your overseas trips or something, all the meetings, etc., to end up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. In between, also you get some time. So I roam around, sit with various people, odd people like the rickshaw pullers or local, sabji vendors or pushcart people who are trying to sell. Or, in fact, quite often even high level people like policemen or politicians, ministers. In fact, I've had this one with the president and king, etc. Those kind, right across the. I summarize my experiences without being judgmental. I just observe and just exactly write, what I observe. So in that sense, that has been a great source of this one for me, satisfaction. And during that course, 1 or 2 experiences I will relate. As much as I am a humorous person, my face somehow has some inclination of too much of seriousness. And it happened in Vietnam. One long hot day I had in the forest, and I had come to one Indian restaurant there, managed by obviously the locals. And I was seated there with about 6, 7 Japanese hosts, and we were contemplating what to eat. But I must have been looking very serious compared to the others. So the lady manager, who must be a young girl of maybe about 25 or something, just walked right across the floor and tick tock karke with her heavy, long this one heels. And then she was coming at me. I just stood up and said, "What's happening?" And towards that group. And then she came right across to me and stood there and said, "Sir, you can afford to smile also, sir." Vietnamese are very, very friendly people, and there is no distinction between man and woman there, girl and boy. There is eve teasing and teasing others, etc., is completely unknown there. Nobody looks down upon in the others, that kind of stuff. It was a very fun experience. In fact, the experience repeated in 2017 or 18, last time when I had been to Shanghai. Again, Shanghai, you have to have a local guide who speaks English, translator. So the travel companies and all give your translator. And then again, Chinese at the personal level is very, very friendly people. I mean, and they are like any other, Indian ladies only. And this lady must have been partly out of BA or something, maybe 23 or 24, etc. The first 1 hour went some, small meetings and some places, etc. And then we're just walking towards our next meeting. Suddenly, this girl turned around and asked me, "Sir, do you know what this is? 2 fingers." I said, "Index fingers, right and left." And sir, I want to know do you know what is the meaning of smile? I gave a little bit of a conscious smile that I'm capable of, which is as much as what I'm now. This is what is smile. And that lady said, "Sir, it's not like this." And she put both her fingers inside her mouth, like this, stretched it right up to her ears. So this is my smiles. That's very, very humorous. In fact, at the end of the day, I gave her sort of permission because they don't accept any gratuity and all that very easily in the East Asian countries. So I wanted to tip her for 100 yuans, which she was slightly reluctant to take. And she said, "What is it for?" I said, "Don't worry, it's only 10 yuans for your guide through the day, but 90 for teaching me how to smile." So these are some fun experiences. And of course, I have so many humorous stories traveling in Europe, especially Dutch, Netherlands.
Yeah.
That was so very humorous, you can't believe. And,
it's often said that travel makes you wise.
yes.
You meet various cultures, various people. We are all sitting in our own setup and we don't even realize. In fact, I'm also personally very fond of traveling, and probably I'll take this offline. But I'll finish off this interview and this series with you asking one major advice that you would give to young people, that what are the skills that these young people should be investing in, and what impresses you the most when you hire someone?
One thing to youngsters is when, at the young age, instead of gathering experience, they want to jump jobs for every 500,000 rupees, which is completely uncalled for. The first 6 or 7 years, they should invest. Even they don't have money to invest, but they should invest in themselves by acquiring skills. It is very, very important. It is easier when you are the same organization trying to do more, going beyond the boundaries, delivering much more value than what the organization is asking for, looking for opportunities so that you get a well-rounded experience. That is important for the first 7 to 10 years. You build a platform with that, you build some confidence, basic level of skill sets, then you can aspire for career progression, whichever way you want. That is very, very essential. And over a period of time, people's skills will come into play. You have to be cultivating it. After that, I said a sense of humor, all those kinds of things will come into play. And you said what do I look for in this one? So these days, I mostly look for either the heads of departments or number twos or such a thing. I would definitely look for technical skills that they are capable of either knowing or at least knowing where they can get the information, and the ability and the humility to admit where they don't know. I don't want anybody to be fooling around, for the answer when they don't know, which can be easily spotted. If they don't know, I said, if I don't know, but this is where I will find out the information. That settles a matter for me. Of course, the second 1/3 of weightage, I'll put it to, let's say, people management. How well he can make friends, whether he can go and sit with his junior colleagues and in a bar and drink his beer very comfortably. How often he can then throw his arms around the shoulders of other people and chat with them. He can inquire after the family affairs and see whether they are living happily, those kinds of things. Whether he can afford his own legs to be pulled by his colleagues, our junior, or he can pull other people's legs, those kinds of things. How level he feels with the other people, that I would this one. Thirdly, of course, is this one, what interaction with the other colleagues in the profession outside the this one industry forums or various other common forums. When he networks and builds his own relationship as well as you know and gathers information as well as what the other people are doing, and his own cross industry comparison of what is happening, etc. Being generally aware of what is happening around, and so that he has all the ready-made information available. One thing is to come to the bridge and then start analyzing the situation, in a number of ways. But that way, you will not spot the opportunities very, very, clearly. The other thing is to be, broad-based in your skills, etc., and keep on working. But when you come to the bridge, you shouldn't even think. By that time, the wealth of knowledge itself should tell you this is the way to, go ahead. So that's the levels of, knowledge, information, networking, and affiliation, and they should have to look around. And I think these are the three things I would normally look for.
So I heard you talking more about a right brain, 70-80% of the right brain and 20-25% on the left brain. My dear friends, this was the discussion with Mr. Kumaraswamy. I think I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, sir. And you shared some real candid experiences of your life, which I'm sure is going to benefit mid-size and senior leaders who have been listening to us today. Thank you so much for taking out time. And I wish you and the entire JK Paper family very, very successful days ahead. May all your colleagues, your family, and yourself be very, very safe in the coming times. And thank you and wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much for giving this forum to address so many of your, the colleagues and industry people.